I went to Harvard for undergrad. I studied economics. From there, I went to McKinsey and fell in love with tech. At this point in time, the biggest unlock that we previously really did not have access to is on unstructured data.
Things are moving every day, every week, and there are so many companies. And I think it's also very challenging for leaders now, right, to stay ahead of the curve.
Now we've unlocked something that is actually 90% of the data stored in an enterprise, right? IDC is telling us that the vast majority of data in a company is unstructured. Companies are popping up every day, becoming good at something, others are falling off, right? So the ability to have a platform and really be integrated with the ecosystem in a very open way, I think is a critical element of building in today's environment.
Hi everyone, and welcome to BetterTech for Olivia. You have an impressive career, right? I must admit at start. Right? You have graduated from Harvard, you have worked at McKinsey, you have led at Google, Fox, Dropbox, Notion, and now you are CEO of Box. So, and board member of many other companies. So, please give us your introduction, your journey, and how that has shaped your leadership style.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I always love to dive into the topic of AI, so looking forward to this conversation. I am a daughter of two immigrants. My parents are actually both from Argentina. And my father is a scientist, and there is not funding for science in Argentina in the way that the United States is able to put together funding. And so my father and mother came here to the United States to pursue science. So that's kind of my background in terms of where all my family lives, where I think about my cousins and my aunts and my uncles. They're all in Buenos Aires. In terms of then growing up, I went to Harvard for undergrad. I studied economics. From there, I went to McKinsey and fell in love with tech. That was during, ironically, the bust and one of the cycles of tech where a bit of it fell apart, but that was an amazing learning to be part of that. And because I fell in love with tech, I came out to Stanford Business School because I realized that coming out to the West Coast and spending time out here was the place to be. And from there, as you mentioned, I spent more time at McKinsey, became a partner there, and after 4 years of being a partner, decided to try something new and went over to Google. And just really enjoyed my time at Google. I spent a couple years on the ad side, so getting to know that business model, and then spent 4 years on the Google Cloud side, which was just a fantastic build for us. We started with 0% market share and learned a lot throughout a number of decisions we were making and trying to build that as a viable player in the cloud marketplace.
That's very interesting journey from the beginning. And you mentioned about the business model, and I think AI is now fundamentally changing the traditional business model. So, what from your experience, what kind of major shifts do you see in the business models, and how are companies now going to generate revenue and create value by using AI?
This is a continuum of shifts in business models that we've seen in tech. Many of us have experienced the packaged software to SaaS. We've also experienced infrastructure also becoming as a service. So throughout that, there was always a per seat model, and there was an element of evolving consumption as part of that per seat model. What you see with AI is now a doubling down on what will become a monetization through consumption as users end up leveraging AI to do a given task. And the degree to which they leverage AI will more likely depend on the role they play in a company than necessarily the number of employees, right, that are in that company. So as you see AI take hold, what I'm really excited about is we'll be able to offer individuals in a company an ability to leverage the full amount of AI that they would like to leverage. And then from a business model perspective, well, of course, we still have and will continue to see that per seat model, right? That is kind of a key element of horizontal software. We will also, I believe, start to see that consumption element really take off. We saw that as we moved on the infrastructure layer, right? So we got to a point at Google where we were doing per second billing. I don't think we've learned a number of lessons from that wave. And then as now we go into AI and think about how individuals are using it, how do we make sure that as an enterprise, it's predictable? Right? But then when you have those power users, you're able to put AI at their fingertips and really allow them to deliver a whole new level of excellence in what they do.
That's very interesting. And actually, I had thought the next question would have, what do you see, the key trends? But I think I already mentioned it's more like getting AI into more consumption. But how do you think that, with these new trends, how can companies, they can stay ahead of curve by leveraging those technologies?
First and foremost, everything needs to be future proofed, right? And I think people are doing that today, but it is less about what AI can currently do and what power it has today, and more about, okay, as you imagine the evolution of it, which as we see is incredibly faster, frankly, than I've seen any other evolution in tech, right? Because you're measuring it in weeks, not months or years. That as teams are designing an offering or a solution, first, they're always focused on the customer, right? They have to be solving a problem for the customer, whether it's on the consumer side or the business side, right? So of course that has to be the number one focus area, is the customer and the end user itself. But then as they bring AI to bear on solving that pain or that need, they probably need to anticipate the 10 future iterations of the technology and design for that future state, right? And so I think what you'll be seeing more and more is initial releases of solutions that in its first instance seem interesting, but maybe a little less satisfactory than what you could imagine. But quickly, as that solution is out in the market, technology will be catching up and really making it just a mind-blowing experience. And so teams need to think about where those two elements come together and plan and build for that. And I would say that's true throughout a company, right? It's not just on the product side that folks need to be anticipating that evolution. It's also on the go-to-market side. It's also on the way in which the company itself is running, right? So how do you think about AI as permeating all elements of a company, not just the product you're building?
Very interesting. So this is fair to say that as much AI brings this opportunity for leader, it also brings this challenge, like how to be fast. Okay, I'm more on the tech side, and I had been following, since the Gen AI part. We had something like LangChain years, because things are moving like, every day, every week, and there are so many companies. And I think it's also very challenging for leaders now, right, to stay ahead of the curve. And as you mentioned, think 10 steps ahead. So it's becoming more like a chess game. Again, I think that's a pretty important. I will ask you again this leadership question, that how they could go. Now, another topic for AI is the role of data that it plays. And we see that a lot of data is, let's say, consumed in those models, open source and generally, and generative AI. What is your take in general, that how, for example, organizational data or data for enterprise can play a role for AI-driven business models?
Well, obviously, we've been talking about data for quite some time now. Even in 1999, when we were creating websites for startups that never saw the light of day or ended up dying in the bust of that cycle, we were already talking about what consumer data do you get now that people are logging on and want to engage, and what does that look like, right? But I would say that at this point in time, the biggest unlock that we previously really did not have access to is on unstructured data. Right. So much of the conversation about data leading up to now has been about structured data, data you find in databases, ERP systems, et cetera. Right. That's kind of the bailiwick of many companies and how they talk about and deal with quote unquote data. But now we've unlocked something that is actually 90% of the data stored in an enterprise. Right. IDC is telling us that the vast majority of data in a company is unstructured. And so how do you access that, right? And that has been the conundrum to date. And the reason why we've been blocked on that to do it at scale has mostly been for cost reasons, right? Obviously, the tech has continued to advance, but really, how do you extract information from this corpus of unstructured data at scale in a viable way where an enterprise would actually set a content strategy with that in mind, namely, I can actually access this unstructured data in a dependable, meaningful way as part of my day-to-day processes and workflows. So that is what I see as the biggest unlock of AI. I'm more of a B2B person. I think about the enterprise. Of course, there are consumer applications, right, where you get to talk to your phone and it's going to book you a restaurant and all of that. But what I get super excited about is how do all of the information workers and people who show up every day, who sit at their computer and think, gosh, I know I saw that somewhere. Where is it, right? And, heaven forbid it's in a scanned document that's in a PDF form, right? But now we've unlocked all of that. And that is truly momentous in terms of what we can access in terms of teams and collaboration and innovation. I just could not be more excited about it.
That's very interesting. And apart from data, organizations also have, challenge to build a whole AI-powered platform or an ecosystem around it. So what do you see, what are, let's say, typical challenges for organizations to build an AI-powered ecosystem and then maintain it?
There are a couple of things that are going to be critical here. One is an open platform, right? Precisely because of what I referenced before. You don't know where the innovation's going. You don't know who your future partners are going to be. Companies are popping up every day, becoming good at something. Others are falling off, right? So the ability to have an open platform and really be integrated with the ecosystem in a very open way, I think is a critical element of building in today's environment. Obviously, we firmly believe that at Box, that seamless platform that is for effective content, right, management and driving intelligence out of it. A lot of it hinges on that open platform. The second I would say is, how do you actually ensure that you are open-minded in terms of the type of AI that you're leveraging, right? So to the extent that you can be AI agnostic, right? So today people are excited about OpenAI. Who knows in a year what the most successful LLM will be. And as we progress over time, we expect to see certain tasks benefiting from different LLMs that have become more niche and more focused, right? So building a platform that actually allows users to access different types of models, at different times, and being incredibly dynamic. So even within the same workflow, you might be accessing different LLMs to perform different parts of those tasks. That will be critical, because in order to future-proof it, you won't know which is going to be the LLM that's going to win, and frankly, how long it's going to be on top for.
Perfect. Yeah, that's a war. I think this is again a very much challenge for technology leaders even to say who is winning and who is on top of the curve. So it's very interesting what you mentioned. It's like also open platform, but also open-mindedness.
Yeah.
That's really good. Thank you. So how, maybe, you have a lot of experience. Could you share some examples, some innovative examples of AI-driven products or services that have changed, customer experience over time?
Yes. So an example that is near and dear to my heart, partly because it GA'd for us today here at Box, is a product called Hubs. And what this empowers the user to do is you put content in the hubs on structured data, right? And it can take massive amounts of data, unlike previous exercises. And now you're able to run AI across it. So you can query that information and then come up with answers that are very meaningful in terms of what you're doing. And so we see examples of this in marketing teams, right, where you're actually able to say, okay, what was the collateral for this customer and what was the narrative that we used to pitch this persona, right? You would have had to go through reams and reams and reams of documents to be able to find that information. And now these teams are simply putting it in a hub. Okay, this is the hub for XYZ customer that we've worked on over the course of 20 years at this agency. And now I'm just going to go in and query it, right? And you're pulling all sorts of different types of content into that hub, and you're able to get immediate answers. So again, it's not taking the place of the person doing the work, but wow, not only are you doing it more effectively and at a higher quality, there's probably things that you would ask that previously you just never bothered to ask because you just knew that it was going to be impossible to determine the answer to the question that you had or just take an inordinate amount of time. So it just opens up really a whole new way of working. I would say one of the skills and capabilities that we all will need to get very proficient at is prompt engineering, right? Which is, what are the questions I'm asking? How am I asking the question? How do I make sure I get that full answer and I'm accessing it in a way that is effective? And so that's kind of going to be the next skill set that people need to take on as they're coming up this curve in AI.
Perfect. And that is one thing that I was thinking next, because you said, how people start using the data and exploiting. So that would have been my next question, that what kind of skills, employees should learn. You mentioned prompt engineering, but also on the other hand, how can, organization prepare their employees for this shift of, AI-oriented products and solutions?
So I would say that on this topic, I do believe that understanding the foundational pieces continues to be important. So for example, I live in Silicon Valley. I have a 14-year-old daughter. May not be surprising to those listening that she is taught how to code in school, right? That's a very freshman year, and you're being taught how to code. And, I went to parent-teacher conferences the other night, and the computer science teacher says, you might be wondering why I'm teaching your children to code. And I do believe that you still need to understand the basic foundations of the thing that maybe in the future you will be helped or assisted by, and maybe future completely automated, but truly understanding those building blocks will continue to matter, right? And so especially as we're in this transition phase where we still need to check the model, right? We need to still check the output. We need to still understand what the fidelity of the answer is, right? And is it getting to human level fidelity and response rates, right? And so that problem solving, that curiosity of really understanding what's going on, are we getting what we need out of it? How do we think about using it differently? All of those fundamental skills where we are continuing to use first principles problem solving to make sure that this thing that we may start to depend more and more on is actually delivering what we need. I think that will continue to be crucial. And frankly, we see it in talking to enterprises today, right? There are certain tasks for which they're willing to leverage AI for because of the level of fidelity in terms of what they get back from the AI model, right? And then there are certain tasks where people are not comfortable yet. And fundamental to that is still there's some team leader in there that's constantly checking and constantly verifying that, yes, in fact, this thing that we are now depending more and more on is delivering the quality that we need it to deliver what honestly can become even a higher quality result, right? But in that transition phase, this continues to be very important.
Interesting. And we spoke about, data and about transformation and people. And I think one important when growing focus is on the responsible AI,
Yes.
development and deployment of those models. So how do you think, how can businesses ensure that there are ethical considerations a part of their overall AI strategy, whether they are consumer of the AI or whether they are the developers of the AI?
Yes, I spent a lot of time at Google. One of the values was do no harm. And I do believe that we, in whatever form that value is articulated, that is an important value, right? That we need to continue to think about this as something that helps us as humans, that hopefully we can take on big and important societal issues and drive impact as a human race. And AI can help us do that. But obviously, we have to be constantly mindful and thinking 4 or 5 steps ahead in terms of, what are the things that could go wrong? And then how do we, in a very optimistic way, make sure that we anticipate that? Now, I think the difficulty right now is that we don't yet know where this is going, right? So how do you regulate some of these topics? And so it's really going to be important for each of the companies working on these topics to be values driven and make sure that they publish their AI principles and their AI values. I think that's incredibly important. I would recommend that before anyone engages a software company, they either ask for those or they go on the website and read them, right? And ask about them and ask about how that takes part in the day-to-day development of that product, right? Because that is what's going to be embedded in the product that you then might be using. So I do think it's incumbent on companies today to take a stance, make it very public, answer questions on it, right? And I'm actually seeing day to day that is in more in conversations with customers at the enterprise level. Those conversations are coming up. It's a very real important part of decision making today, and which makes me happy because it's reinforcing that there's a need for this value driven approach.
No, that's great. That's really insightful. Um, by the way, I also had a chance to look at one of your articles. Long time ago article, but still very well cited. They grow fast or die slow, right? And in that article, I quote, you mentioned the software and online services companies can quickly become billion-dollar giants, yet sustaining that growth is quite challenging. So, what do you think? How relevant it is still? Is it how relevant that statement is still today? And then, what are the key strategies that are essential for the companies that grow this way and grow quick to sustain the growth?
Yeah, so interestingly, the findings, even though it was quite some time ago, when I was a partner at McKinsey when I published that article, now over 10 years ago, but they still hold true, right? Which is there's only about 20 SaaS companies that have reached $1 billion as independent companies, right? And that's very noteworthy in a world where, I think as of a couple of weeks ago, we had 1,400 unicorns or, self-proclaimed unicorns from a funding level perspective. Now, those might be 2020 type valuations, but still, right, an enormous amount of unicorns. And then the reality is there is just an incredible drop-off that happens between being a unicorn or a decacorn and actually being a company that has $1 billion in revenue, right? And so what we tend to see is that it's the companies that continue to be curious, continue to lean in innovation, and frankly, move strategically into their Act 2 and Act 3 at the appropriate time, right? And that is critical. So if you're in the Act 1 of your company and you're barely off the ground and you're already moving into Act 2, well, you might not have given that product set, that set of solutions, frankly, the customers and personas you're delivering for enough time to really soak in the product, for it to take hold, for an ecosystem to build up and really ramp, such that when you launch your Act Two, it can thrive and build off of what you've delivered in Act One. Conversely, right, if you wait too long to plan for your Act Two, right, and you think, oh, I'm just going to eke a little more of growth out, and I don't know which bet to make, and it's all too intimidating, and how are we going to navigate this? Then what ends up happening is kind of this slow petering off over time. And so really pushing yourselves as a leadership team to say, okay, what is the next chapter of this company? What will it be? Right. And that's something I see today at Box, where this next chapter that we're in right now, launching of intelligent workflows, is incredibly exciting. It's hard. We're trying to future-proof it, but it's building on this amazing right to engage and deliver and manage on the unstructured data of the enterprise, right? But without that calling card of, incredible level of governance and permissioning and security and incredible ability to manage that content, then those are the foundational elements that then give us the right to have this third act, which is all about now intelligent workflows, right? So content-based workflows, which when you think about the enterprise is frankly the majority of the enterprise, right? And so that is very important in terms of the sequencing and the bets that the leadership teams are making. And frankly, the boards of those companies are making, right? Like the board needs to be behind that. There is a time where you see different needs of the company, but when the time is for growth, that everyone's leaning in.
And by the way, just I'd say a bit side question from Deepika. How do you see the change of mind of the leadership over time? And you also mentioned previously, go 10 steps ahead. It's faster. You need to think a lot forward and you need to be more aggressive. So how do you see that over your career? How the leadership is actually adopting to that for large enterprise?
The fundamental quality that I see an amazing leader in enterprise SaaS companies is the customer centricity. And that sounds cliche, but honestly, you can see it in how a leader runs their meetings, right? So when we started at Google Cloud, we, as I mentioned, had one infrastructure customer in the form of Snap. It was public at the time. They were paying us $400 million to be kind of their infrastructure layer. And then we really didn't have a cloud business other than our SaaS business, which was the G Suite Google Workplace business. And so, but we had an amazing amount of tech. I mean, the engineers at Google were just, of course, every single day innovating in amazing ways. But it all came down to the customer, right? And so for those years when we were building Google Cloud, Diane Green would lead her staff meeting, and you would sit in her staff meeting and it would be all about the customer. What does the customer need? Everything from the product itself to the bill we sent them. Is this going to be overwhelming? Does any department that processes this bill actually want to do business with us? Really, the whole entire customer experience, thinking about that maniacally end to end. And I think that any leader who's the head of a software company that does that day to day and just stays focused on what are we delivering to the customer and what is going to be better as a result of this customer using our solution, right? And then where I've seen kind of the failure mode of that is like, this is so cool. If we build it, they will use it. And I've seen that up close and personal, and that does not go well.
No, perfect. So I think that's a reaffirming advice. I had a question. I thought about asking it more clearly. Like, okay, what is your advice for future leaders? But I understand that it's be customer focused, right? It's simple, and you will be
through every single detail, right? Not just at the macro level of the problem we're solving, but then the whole experience of what does it mean to engage with you as a provider and a solution for that entity.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And by the way, you had different roles and you did a lot of optimization of operations. And maybe one particular example I can ask you for roles for sales reps. Sales reps for organizations spend a lot of time other than actually their actual selling, right? So what kind of strategies did you implement in, for example, Google Cloud or at Box? to 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 improve the operations for sales and let people focus on high quality activities, let's say?
Well, I'm most excited about what we're doing now, partly because tech is quickly evolving. So what we're doing now is, to me, just really breaking new barriers in terms of what we can enable sellers to do, right? And so a perfect example of that is you go into a conversation with a customer and you've leveraged a hub that I mentioned, and you've put all of the information of that customer, right? So the latest 10K, some videos, some, data tables, whatever it may be. A lot can be external, right? But also internal. And then when you show up for that customer engagement, you are prepared in a level that historically would have taken, a day to prepare for, right? And then you combine that, and this gets super interesting for those of you who haven't seen it, with sentiment analysis, right? So you can actually leverage apps today that assess and tell you, how does this person show up? What is the best way to engage in this person, right? And they're basically taking that information from various times, whatever time this person has been quoted, whatever podcast this person has done, whatever is available publicly, and saying, okay, based on all this information, this is how you should engage with that person. And for a seller showing up to a conversation cold with someone they've never met before, that is incredibly powerful. And in fact, just the other day, we were doing training in our San Francisco office, and they tried it on me, and this is a room of people who maybe not all have spent time with me, but they're SDRs or sales development reps, right? So they're doing that first outbound call. And sure enough, they kind of scraped the World Wide Web of everything I've ever said. And they nailed it. I mean, they really nailed it in terms of what would be most effective in engaging me in a conversation. And so the tools that are available to go-to-market teams today are just mind-blowing. Now, of course, the challenge is there's almost too many, right? There's this proliferation of tools and all the things that you can do as a go-to-market team, and that can become distracting. So what I do recommend is that people are very intentional. The leaders are very intentional about, okay, here are the platforms we're going to use. Here's how we minimize this distraction that might come from using, frankly, too many apps all at once. And then this is our strategy to bringing AI into engaging with our customer, but also not letting it be a distraction and being it overly complex. But it's an incredibly exciting time.
Exactly. I can understand it. And by the way, you also know, I think it's a great and very fun discussion, very insightful. We can have many more questions, but I will move to a more closing question. And that's about, your own personal journey. You from tech leadership and, a lot of, brilliant career as a leader from different companies. You also moved your role towards investor and board member of many companies. So, first of all, what kind of companies do you invest? And secondly, what are the key parameters that you look into a certain business and then you decide to invest? And you also mentioned right now, there is a lot going on. So I think that would be very insightful for us to know.
I would say first and foremost, I'm an operator. I love operating. I enjoy working with teams. I love the joy of something well executed. Building is just my happy place, even though it's hard and you make a lot of mistakes. I have a lot of mistakes I've made and scars on my back as a result. But the operating day to day is really where I enjoy the most. Now, I would say I have joined a couple boards. That has been primarily because I got super passionate about the tech, right? So I'm on a private board, a company called Light Matter. This is photonic compute. And for me, this is so, so important because as I was sitting at Google and seeing the build out of data centers, right? So even then, we were not building data centers quickly enough. And now, as we all know, the level of compute necessary to drive AI is 10xing, 1000xing that, right? So here is a company that I just got super excited about the tech because actually photonic compute can do that with far less energy draw, right? And so then I bring kind of my climate wishes for our planet as well as my excitement about technology. And that's something I care a lot about, right? And so I've invested 4 years in that company and the team's just done an amazing job. And so I really choose where I get involved in my passions and where I want to spend my time. And frankly, probably is equally important and more important are the people, right? So great founders, just visionaries, people who are just out there getting stuff done. It gets me super excited. And then on the investing side, actually, that's more, I let professional investors do the investing. I'm involved in something called the Operator Collective, which is just a fantastic group of women. I feel very humbled to have been asked to join. And we all engage and look at different companies and help companies in the portfolio. But actually, there's a prime investor who's kind of leading it. And that's just a wonderful way for us to come together as operators, but also give back. And so that's just a fun engagement.
No, that's really great to know. That's really great to know that you're contributing in different ways to the technology. And thank you very much. We are really proud and very happy to have you today, Olivia. And thank you again and have a nice day.
Thank you. Thank you for the time. I enjoyed the conversation.